Hello, friends. Welcome, Sail Happy Home. I'm happy to be here with you today. It's Wednesday, May 20th. Oh, man, my eyes are itchy and burny today. I don't know why. I don't have allergies. But I saw something interesting last night, and I wanted to share my insights with you. There was a montage on a YouTube channel that I love and I watch a lot about young people in their 20s. I think a couple of them might have been in their 30s who were running off and losing their minds over having to work a full-time job. They hate corporate America. They can't stand it. They just don't know how they're going to cope with this. They've quit their jobs because they just couldn't deal with it. And some of their reasons actually make a lot of sense. The what I've been saying all along about working and corporate America is that 40 or more hours a week is not natural for humans. In ancient times, small clusters of communities, one person would be the farmer that provides the meat or the dairy or the eggs. Someone who was a seamstress or a washerwoman would take care of the clothes or make the clothes. Everybody had a role in that community, in that village, that kept everybody going because not everybody could read or write. Not everybody was capable of making clothes, but still needed clothes. Some people who lived in the actual main street of the areas there, the blacksmith might be there, the farrier might be there, you might have a merchant, like a mercantile there, but the farmers were out on the outskirts, and in order to get those goods to everybody, they needed to come into town, and people in town didn't have place to have cattle and stuff. So it was a barter system, and everybody did a give and take to make sure that everybody had everything that they needed. And if they didn't, then they'd find businesses to come in and fill it in, right? So having to work 40 hours or more a week is not natural. It's also not healthy because we don't have enough time for the important, meaningful parts of our lives. And I am completely against 40-hour work weeks. I think we need to be on 3 12-hour shifts or 4 10s and have 3 to 4 days off for our families, for our homes, for ourselves, for our self-care, for our hobbies and our passions. We need to be able to be spending time out in nature, spending time relaxing. And when we are just going from racing from the job to racing home to going through the mail and making the supper and getting the kids ready and doing this and that and the other thing, and then you have maybe an hour, 2 hours to yourself in the evening, that's not living. There's no quality of life there. So these young people were 1,000% right on board with me and why I think 40-hour work weeks are bullshit and it should not be allowed. Even emergency services, police officers, fire departments, EMS, they work on off shifts, usually several days on, several days off, several days on, several days off, because the jobs are so life-threatening and intense. So why is it that the rest of the world has to be stuck doing this, right? Why can't we shift things around? There's even a way that we can do it in my line of business, but when I try to pose it to our bosses at the town halls or at the management meetings, they look at me like deer in the headlights. And I think I'm quite articulate and fluent in English, so I know I'm not tripping on my words. I even came up with a schedule that would work to put us on 4 10s. But they all look at me like, ugh. And these are the people making 6 figures. You know what I mean? Also, the reason, see, some of their complaints, as legit as their complaints were, I saw that their complaints were really based on lack of experience because they haven't been in the workforce long enough to really understand how things operate. But also they don't understand things about corporate life. And the primary complaint was corporate life. Now, in corporations, everything hinges on liability. They're in the business of providing some kind of product or service that is going to make them a lot of money. And everybody has to start at the bottom. So you might have the crappiest job in the place, but it will only be temporary if you apply yourself, put in the effort and the work, and you get to move up the ladder. And when you move up the ladder, you make more money, better benefits, and an easier life, and you can take more time off. So they don't understand that they probably the crappy jobs that they had were because they were low man on the totem pole. But also, they don't understand the nuances of corporate life. And again, corporations exist from a place of liability. And quite literally, everything that their employees say, do, even the clothes you wear, can cause a problem that can become a legal liability for that company, for that corporation. So they have strict rules in place. They have dress codes in place. They have no fraternization clauses in your employment contracts that you sign. They have contracts with verbiage that you can't get personally involved with other people on your job. You can't sell their information. You can't talk about their information. You can't do this on social media, even on your own time, because you are still employed by that company and connected to them, and it could be a liability. So everything hinges on the legal aspect. So some of these young people didn't understand about the dress codes. They didn't understand. A lot of them had a problem with the verbiage, well, the circle back and checking in and, stuff like that. The reason they come up with these statements, these languages, if you will, that are unique to each corporation, because it's going to be comprised of two elements. One is statements, phrases, and words that are acceptable by your HR that anybody can use with interactions with anybody else in that company that are never going to be construed as harassment, menacing, threats, anything derogatory. So they make these simple, static, vague statements. They also want to express an energy of positivity in their workforces, so they have to have verbiage that provides that positivity. For example, in my line of work, we're not allowed to say, no, we can't do that. No, it doesn't work that way. No, you can't do that. We have to phrase everything that we say when interacting with the public in a positive way. So if we're dealing with a complete and utter jackass and they are refusing to comply, we have to be able to say something kind and positive while explaining to them that they're a jackass and they're doing everything wrong and that's their fault. So it's part of the corporate environment because of liability. And, if you sell a particular product, it's going to have a name. The actions involved in creating that product and developing that product are going to have specific names. It's like working in the legal field. You're going to know legal verbiage. If you're a doctor, you're going to know medical terms, etc. It's the same thing in each corporate world as well. So a lot of them didn't understand about this verbiage, and it was very, very taxing on them. They didn't understand about, how you have to dress a certain way. And a lot of these young people, they haven't been taught, they don't understand that you can't, when you are on the clock and in an office, they own your ass. You are theirs for that 8 hours, and you must follow their rules and live by their standards while you are existing in their office and they are paying you to do so. Your place of employment is not your bathroom at home. It is not a frat house. It is not the 7-Eleven at the corner. It is not your mom's living room. It is a professional environment with a goal in mind, and you must be able to walk the walk and talk the talk if you want to survive in that environment. I get it. Nobody should have to work 40 hours a week. In fact, I knew a man 22 years ago now, a man who, he was a young man. He was just like a year or two out of high school. And he and I were chatting one day, and he told me that he only worked a part-time job. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, but how do you support yourself? And he said, I've decided I am not giving up my entire life to a job, so I'm working part-time. And I am choosing to be responsible and live only within the means that a part-time job will provide. So I found that to be interesting. He lived in a small apartment and shared expenses, and he ate very modestly and he dressed very modestly, and he was willing to give up a lot of the accoutrements of life, as we know it, closets full of clothes and refrigerators packed with food and more than one car and all of these other things, because he felt that there was more to life than that. He accepted that he had to work to pay bills and buy food and clothes, but he didn't want to sell himself out and never be able to enjoy the true part and the real meaning of being alive, which is to enjoy this life that we've been given. So we have to come together in a corporate environment, or in my case, a government office, or a medical facility, whatever your business is. And there's going to be rules and regs that you're not going to like or you're not going to agree with. I've got stuff going on here all the time that I think is absolute lunacy, makes no sense, has no meaning or purpose to whatever we're doing. I can give them facts and examples and scenarios that prove my bewilderment, and still they're like, huh? Because they're so tied up in themselves and in their money and in their corporate greed and everything that they just don't think anymore. Remember, the higher up the ladder you go, the less oxygen there is up there. These people aren't thinking clearly. But yeah, so I can agree with them. Everything they said was a valid reason to hate work. Every reason. I've had those reasons. I believe in those reasons. I hate having to work 40 hours a week. It makes me physically ill. But it has to be done. I have responsibilities to myself, to my home, to my husband, to my family, to my pets, and to my community. And that means to work my job, be a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen, be a good wife to my husband, a good mom to my pets, a good auntie to my nieces and nephews, a good sister to my sister. And yes, that requires money. Going to enjoy my sister's birthday coming up in a week. Takes money. We're going to an exclusive restaurant, her very favorite place, and we're going to be traveling to get there. And it's going to take money. It's going to take time. But I'm afforded those things because I have a paycheck. And I have a paycheck because I get up and work a 40-hour-a-week ball and chain job. So as much as I despise the Gen Zs and the Gens, the 20-somethings and all that nonsense, they actually made really, really valid points. And I think it needs to be acknowledged and credit needs to be given where credit is due. And I feel them. I really do. I know a lot of their complaints are absolutely reasonable and legitimate. I know that a lot of them are based on lack of experience in the corporate world. But by God, I found that I have something in common with these bitter, little, useless assholes. And let me tell you, if you're shocked about that, so am I. I can't stand people, especially those people. Those 20 somethings, those 30 somethings, those lazy, entitled people. God. I mean, I get it. I do. Work sucks. But until something better comes along, until there's a new system in place, we got to do what we got to do. So you have to make a choice. Are you going to give up a lot of the material things and financial security that you have to work part-time so that you can have more joy in your life with your family and whatnot? Or are you going to bite the bullet and try to make do? Make the best of what time you do have with them. Because the fact of the matter is we are taxed to death. We are priced to death. And we live in an older house. We drive older vehicles, but they're paid for. We don't take vacations. We don't. We don't do things like that. Douglas went to McDonald's on the way home for supper last night and complained even to this day. 24 hours later, he's complaining about the cost of McDonald's for two people. So we get it. We do. Unfortunately, until something is done to change that, like Trump promising everybody's going to be rich as hell and, the roads are truly going to be paved with gold, until that day comes, we're stuck. And besides, if nobody worked, that would mean that there is also nobody to make your food, make your clothes, maintain the streets, pick up the trash and the garbage. Nobody would want to work for law enforcement or EMS. So if you were in trouble, you wouldn't have anybody there. So it's physically impossible for people to not work. And we know that utopian societies and Jesus cults and stuff, religious cults and stuff, have tried many, many times through the years to do, to live in harmony with each other and so on and so forth. And they've all ended badly because they really just didn't have it together. So one extreme to another, we got to find some common ground. But yeah, I did find some common ground with these young people, and I was shocked. I shocked myself because, God, it takes a lot to admit that. Because, they're just, ugh. I have no time for them. But I get their point. Because I feel the exact same way. I scream all the time, just like they did on TikTok. I scream all the time at home. So, yeah, I think that change is needed. And I hope that these young people, rather than just bitching and complaining on TikTok and quitting their jobs and just going to another horrible job, I hope that they can turn that inward, become assertive, and come up with real life plans, realistic real life plans, where we can change the whole structure of that so that people can live happily and in harmony and not have to give so much of their time to an ungrateful corporation, to slave drivers, to criminals and crooks, and to line other people's pockets off of the back of your hard work. So if you've got an idea about how society can move forward, make it better, make it healthier, make it more reasonable, I'm all ears. And I'm sure all of the 20-somethings that were complaining on TikTok, I think they would be all ears too. And until next time, do good and be good.